Hi, everybody. So since we're getting started on our first project, I thought I would give you a couple of tips for getting started. And these are specifically geared towards the project we're working on right now, but most of them are always a good idea. All right, so the first thing is to do the planning work. So I think a lot of people underestimate how much planning making a project really is. So before you actually make the real thing, you want to think it through. So for this project, we're using our simple generator sheet that hopefully gave you some ideas. And then also our planning sheet because that's helping you put together those ideas. And then lastly, of course, you're working on your rough draft. Most of you are working on that this week, or you might have already started that. So if you're in person, please print off your planning sheet so that I can see what you're planning to do and I can help you with that. And obviously, if you're working remotely, make sure you have access to both of those things because those are there to help you. So make sure you're working through your ideas and reflecting on them. So a lot of times in art, we'll come up with an idea and then sometimes we change it. We alter it, we make it better, or we come up with an idea that is better and we go with that instead. So I think the main idea there is instead of sticking with one idea the whole time, to be open to new ideas and changing your ideas and strengthening your concept. So don't get too stuck on the first thing that comes to your mind. Try to think through that, reflect on it, and think about if there's any way that you could make it more interesting or stronger. So the goal is to play around with your idea, your design until it's the best you can do. And, you're really pleased with the result and you've also challenged yourself. Another good idea is to ask for opinions and feedback. I think in art, sometimes we feel really self-conscious about what we're creating and our ideas because it's so our own. Like in math or in science, you come up with a right answer and it's the right answer. Everyone has the same answer. But art isn't like that. You're coming up with your own answer. And sometimes that's a little bit intimidating, but I do think it's helpful to get opinions and feedback. And sometimes that's a little bit scary because we're afraid that somebody is going to knock down our idea. But a lot of times in art, I see students come up with better results when they're willing to ask somebody else for their thoughts, or even, ask the teacher or a friend or someone at home. Sometimes other people see things that we don't see when we're super close to a design. So don't be afraid to reach out and get opinions and feedback. We'll be doing some of that in class, obviously a little bit limited this year, but we'll be doing some of that in class as well. But yeah, don't stick to yourself, try to, two heads are better than one. So try to get some feedback and opinions because it'll probably make your idea stronger. You don't always have to take it. If you disagree with, what someone comes up with, that's okay. But at least it's there. Identify where you need help. So when we're working on a project, you want it to be challenging. If it's super easy, you're probably on the wrong track. So if you have a challenging idea, which you probably should, you want to find what we call a reference image. So a reference image is something that you can look at that's going to help you to better draw or sculpt or create the image you're trying to make. So for example, in mine, one of my reference images is a scale because I wanted to put a scale in mine to represent my horoscope. But I don't have a scale memorized in my head. It's really helpful for me to look at one so I can see how many pieces it actually has and what it really looks like instead of what I think it looks like in my head. Once you have that reference image, you want to practice it before committing. So I don't want to practice on my, finished project. I want to practice, feel a little bit more comfortable, and then try it on my project. The other thing you can do is break it into smaller parts to make it more doable. So instead of trying to draw it by going around the whole shape, I would break it into pieces. So for example, I would probably start with this line and then I would probably create the base off of it. And then I would make these two pieces and then I would add in the two scales. Because sometimes if you mess up the base or, the main structure, all those other pieces you're going to add on won't look quite right either. So start simple, break it into small doable pieces instead of trying to do the whole thing at once. Also, use your tools. I think a lot of times in art, we underutilize the resources and the tools that we have. So in your project, if you have a shape that you're drawing over and over and over again, and you're trying to make it look exactly the same, it might be beneficial to create a stencil. That way you're not trying to make the same thing look exactly the same 20 times. Even if it's a really intricate shape and you're trying to repeat it 4 times, if it's going to be helpful to you to create a stencil, you might want to think about that. Also consider if it makes sense to use a ruler. So if you're trying to divide your circle in half, or you're trying to find the exact middle, instead of guesstimating, bust out your ruler and find out where the half really is. Because otherwise, if it's off, it'll probably be noticeable at the end of the design and it's going to bother you, and other people will probably notice it too. You don't want people to notice your errors. You want them to notice your design, your ideas, what you were able to come up with. So again, if you need straight lines and edges, use a ruler, no worries. And I think if in doubt, if it results in a better result, so a better end product, the answer is probably yes. So again, like if you think your project's going to be stronger, if you do use a ruler or if you do make stencils, then you probably should go for it. All right, whenever we're starting a project, you always want to start lightly in pencil. And this is because you want to be able to erase if you need to. So if I work really heavy with my hand, it's really hard for me to erase. Or I always have students that will start a project and then they'll like the part that they've started, so they'll go over it with color or Sharpie, and then they add the rest and they realize that they didn't have enough room or they want to change and alter it. So what we want to do is get the whole design down lightly in pencil first, so that if we need to go back and make changes, we absolutely can. And then we'll add, color and Sharpie, and we'll be talking about that. Sharpie is, up to you, but we'll be talking about adding color next week. But this week, we're really just focusing on making it as good as possible and challenging ourselves and figuring out where we want things to go. And you probably want to get a little bit of feedback before you add color anyway, because you might discover that, if you added one other thing, it would really add to your design, or, maybe you accidentally have a typo in there or whatever. It's usually good to have at least one other person look at it before you commit to color. All right, so lastly, guys, pace yourself and use your time. So the goal is to use your time as effectively as possible. So if you have 2 weeks to work on a project, you don't want to be the first finisher. If you finish and we have a whole week left, that probably means that you didn't give yourself enough challenge. So right now we're kind of figuring out what your work pace is. Some of you will be slower workers and some of you will be faster workers. So if you're a slower worker, you might need to modify your design a little bit so that it's realistic and doable for you. I want it to be challenging, but I also want it to be realistic. If you're a faster worker, you might need to work on adding extra challenge so that your project is going to be challenging enough for you. So we're going to have to work on pacing ourselves and finding that balance, using our time to the best of our ability. So if you find yourself with extra time, ask yourself, is there more I could do? Your expectations should be high. I'm looking for challenge, but it should also be realistic for you. So I'm not grading you based off of your classmates. I'm looking at where your skills are in the beginning and how you are growing as an individual. So if you're not challenging yourself and you're not growing, you're probably not quite where you need to be. The goal is to change and to grow. It doesn't matter what where your classmates are or where your neighbor's at. It matters, what are you doing and how are you growing as an art student? And then, of course, reach out if you need help. Obviously, if you're in class, that's a little bit easier. But if you're out of class, I'm offering office hours this week on Thursday. So you could reach out in that way. You could shoot me an email. You could just ask me for feedback. Or, you don't have to only ask me. You could ask a friend or a family member and get their ideas as well. But definitely, if you're stuck or you're just not quite sure about something, reach out and communicate. So anyway, I cannot wait to see you guys' first project. I love, love, love seeing everyone's creativity and the way that, you approach the project and how different everyone's ideas are. Super excited. So anyway, if you need more help, reach out, and that's it. I'll talk to you guys later.